It's 12 minutes to the hour. You're listening to Paris Live at PM on Radio France International, and returning now to our top story, and that's the situation in Syria's Aleppo. The evacuation of civilians and rebels from remaining opposition-held territory in the city's east has been stalled amid reports of heavy shelling. Turkey's foreign minister accused the Syrian government and its allies of trying to block a ceasefire agreement which was brokered by both Turkey and by Russia. The foreign minister said that Iran and Russia need to accept responsibility and to stop passing the blame. Well, the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is due to speak with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin later today in a bid to rescue that deal. With us now in the studio to discuss Turkey's role in the Syrian conflict is Dorothée Schmid, head of the Turkish Studies program at the French Institute of International Relations, or IFRI, here in Paris. You're very welcome to the program, Dorothée.
Merci.
Now, this ceasefire and evacuation deal, if it is implemented, it would mark a major victory for President Assad over the opposition forces. Ankara is working hard to keep this truce on track, but as we know, Ankara is no friend of Assad. So what's motivating its involvement in Aleppo?
I think that the Turks have a definite objective to show that they're efficient in the Syrian crisis, in the Syrian context, especially more so as they're facing a very deep internal crisis. And what we've seen is this, first, the military intervention of Turkey, a little east of Aleppo, was clearly a demonstration of force on the part of the Turkish government at the moment when they were they had just faced this coup attempt, and they'd been trying to clean up the army of all these supposedly Gulen, pro-Gulen elements, etc. So I think the Turks are, this is a sort of marketing operation in some way that they're doing in Syria. And the other aspect of this image operation is to show that they're close to the Russians and that they are talking with the Russians who are just doing the game in Syria currently, and that they are the number one partner. The problem is that obviously they forgot that there was Iran in the lobby, which was also the main sponsor of Bashar al-Assad.
Okay, so a bit of a PR, a bit of a marketing exercise there. And just regarding that military intervention in Syria, we did hear Erdogan this morning saying that Turkish military had killed 1,800 terrorists, Islamic State terrorists, also Kurdish militia fighters. But what's interesting is that last month Erdogan said that Turkey had intervened in Syria to end the rule of what he called the cruel Assad. So then afterwards he reneged a few days later when he said that Turkey was only interested in combating terrorist groups in Syria. So why do you think that Turkey is toning down that rhetoric against Assad?
I was just to say that they're very ambivalent, but they're not even ambivalent. They're very flu. It's very blurred at the moment. If you follow the Turkish diplomatic discourse, if you refer to what Erdogan says, or Binali Yildirim, the prime minister says, or what the top advisors say, sometimes there are statements leaking that Turkey could do without Assad, and that Assad is not their top priority. That toppling Assad is not anymore the Turkish top priority in Syria, and that we have to find they're actually their main vision for the future of Syria is that you have to reach an inclusive solution. So what has to be changed is only to put Assad back into the basket, you know. It could be a very inclusive solution. So I think now, at some point, Assad could be considered as a sort of also bargaining chip with Russia. The Turks want to show that they can stand firm against Assad, but my concern is that they don't have the upper hand, actually. They're not deciding.
Okay, so just concerning that cooperation between Russia and Turkey. It's quite newfound. It's been now, I think, just over a year since that Russian jet was downed by Turkey. So those tensions have been somewhat put to one side. And Erdogan, I think, has put a lot of investment in trying to repair ties with Vladimir Putin. But what exactly is behind this rapprochement? Do you think Russia is Turkey's way of making sure that it has a say in the post-war political setup in Syria?
That's for sure, but that's only one element in the bilateral relation between Russia and Turkey. First, I think we can consider that the downing of the Russian jet was an accident. It was unintended. I mean, this discussion has been going on for a year in Turkey. Different parts of the government accusing each other of being responsible for it. And there is a great suspicion that Ahmet Davutoğlu, the former genius prime minister, then former genius foreign minister, then prime minister, has been fired because of the fire of the downing of the Russian plane. So probably Tayyip Erdogan is very concerned with maintaining the balance in the region. He doesn't want to get crossed with anyone, and confronting Russia is extremely risky for the Turks on the political and strategic side, but also for economic reasons. And the sanctions that were decided by Russia on the Turkish economy right after the downing of the jet have had important consequences in Turkey, because the growth is already decreasing in Turkey. They had to cut exports to Russia. They had no Russian tourists coming to Turkey anymore. So that was a great blow. And
those sanctions have now been lifted, though,
yes,
haven't they?
And
yes.
at the core of it, you must remember that Turkey is buying like 2/3 of the gas it uses to sustain its economic growth. So they're extremely dependent economically on Russia. And the problem is that also Turkish diplomacy has failed into maintaining, this great objective of the zero problem with neighbors. So they've been desperately in search of new allies. And they wanted also to distance themselves from NATO to a certain extent, to show that they can keep the balance and they have an autonomous stance.
Sure.
So Russia is obviously the number one best partner if you want to, challenge NATO, clearly.
Sure, yeah, given the recent tensions between Russia and NATO. But what I'm wondering is, what will Bashar al-Assad be making of these renewed rapprochement in ties between Turkey and Russia?
I'm quite sure Bashar al-Assad will never forget that the Turks were their number one enemy, and that Erdogan kept on, advocating for the toppling of Assad all along since 2011. I'm quite sure the Syrian president will not be any lenient to the Turks, and that he's not going to help them. So what should be now watched very carefully is what's going on notably in Al-Bab, where the Turks are trying to seize the city, which is a very important also asset for the Syrian government. So I have been afraid since the Turkish army entered Syria that we would have incidents where the Turks would be militarily confronting either the Syrian army or the Hezbollah or some Iranian,
That's right, because we need
military.
to remember that Russia and Turkey, they're essentially on opposite sides of this conflict, with Turkey lending support to the Syrian rebels.
Yes. They're supposed to be, so they're the point where they converge is the anti-terror strategy that everybody's supposed to agree on, like fighting ISIS or destroying ISIS or rolling ISIS back anywhere. But the problem is that the Turks are also pursuing their own national interests in Syria. And of course, the top priority is to contain the Kurds.
Just looking at that Aleppo evacuation, the plan is for the civilians to be evacuated first, followed by the rebels. Apparently they're to be taken to Idlib. Turkey now says that it's planning on setting up a tent city that would take in 80,000 people fleeing eastern Aleppo. We don't know if that's going to be located in Turkey or in Syria. But Erdogan did criticize the UN for failing to set up a safe zone in Syria. Do you think Turkey sees itself somewhat as assuming the role of the UN here?
I think the Turks have used the refugee issue for diplomatic purposes since the beginning of the crisis. They took in many Syrians, and they have been sort of leveraging on the presence of Syrian refugees inside Turkey to put pressure on the West, not only on the UN, the HCR, but they want to show that they are more responsible. The problem is that now they have closed the border, basically. So as they have closed the border, they don't want more refugees in. So most probably they will set up the refugee camps inside Syria, and there have been attempts in the past to do so.
Dorothée Schmid, thank you very much for joining RFI.